I would like to first make the transition to King Crimson 5, although it's 10 years later in time. Nevertheless, you talked about 1985 being a transformer year for yourself, for you personally in your life, but you started working on the music for a film, Neuromancer.
Yes, Neuromancer, the about to be becoming film of the William Gibson novel, yes.
And you said about that music that it more or less came to you as the new King Crimson music.
Part of the music I was considering was definitely King Crimson music. So I was considering how King Crimson might approach recording, and that was 1987. But the film fell through. So the plans, which were in very, very early stages, never went further.
And is music from that period that emerged to you, that came to you, is that used later in King Crimson 5?
The quick answer is no, although the vocabulary being developed can be heard.
Why was it that it took 10 years to let King Crimson 5 be born?
If you want to look at the period 1984 to 91, essentially that was 7 years of guitarcraft. Essentially that was 7 years of guitarcraft. And you could say when King Crimson ceased to exist in the, I believe, July onwards, that was, from one point of view, with the retreat to Claymont, that was the beginning of guitarcraft from one point of view, which became apparent in 85, the beginning of 85, and continued into 91. I took the decision to re-establish, reincarnate King Crimson, however you want to look at it. Reform is not quite a word I'd use. At the end of 1990, but I hadn't exactly figured the details. Adrian came to see me in England, visited me at home in 91, early 91, and said it's time we should do King Crimson again.
And then, sorry.
So that was, in a sense, that was the beginning decision, where the idea became concrete enough to say, all right, we'll run with it. At that time, Tony Levin was out with Gabriel, I think. Essentially, the plan was King Crimson would begin in 1991. Not everyone was available, so the idea moved backwards. Bill was still managed by E.G., which would not have been possible for Bill to work in King Crimson while managed by E.G. I said to Bill, are you, words along, Bill, are you happy with E.G. management? And he said yes. So I didn't take it any further with Bill at that time. What Bill had done was reorganize his management relationship, reformalize his management relationship with E.G., which enabled him, after a period of 18 months from that renegotiation, to leave them, although he had to pay them 10% of his income for the next period of time. Nevertheless, he could leave management. King Crimson began rehearsal in Woodstock in 94. On the very first day, Bill could leave E.G. management, which he did. So you have the period, say, from 1991, where King Crimson will play soon, but isn't able to bring that about until 1994. Meanwhile, I went off to work with David Sylvian, with Tragun 2. So Adrian took on other work, and so on. So we weren't able to pull it together, actually, till 1994. Another way of looking at 1991 is the beginning of the dispute with E.G., who saw, in order to meet their... What had happened is this. As a property company, Messrs Alder and Fenwick in the old Chelsea Property Corporation, and with their other interest in the Lloyd's insurance market, which lost, I think, £8 billion in a 5-year period. They borrowed £4 million from the E.G. Music Group. So the money which was going into the E.G. Music Group, E.G. Publishing, E.G. Records and so on, was lent formally in 1989 and 1990 to Athol & Co., which was a company under the common control of Messrs Alder and Fenwick. This is only the very top. I have written the book. I have all the details on file, whatever. Now, when it came to January the 1st, 1991, and royalties were due to be paid, because £4 million had been taken out of E.G. Music Group, there wasn't the money to pay the artists. Now, my wife, meanwhile, had considerable difficulties getting her money, her income for work she'd been doing, and cottoned on to this a lot sooner than I did, because I'd been with E.G. for a long time and I trusted them. She came in and had a different perspective. Now, in December 1991, my wife received a letter via her solicitor that she was not allowed to talk to me about E.G. under the gagging order which had been enclosed in her management settlement contract for her to leave E.G. What had happened was, in 1991, in order to get on and rebuild her career after E.G. management, she signed a settlement contract which included a gagging order. So did a lot of people that worked at E.G. Brian Eno isn't allowed to mention E.G. His wife, who's his manager, worked at E.G., isn't allowed to mention E.G. Brian Ferry isn't allowed to talk about E.G. Former employees aren't allowed to talk about E.G. But I didn't sign the gagging order, so I have no prohibition, provided what I say is, of course, accurate and can be verified. Well, after £4 million was taken out of E.G. Music, there was not money available to pay certain artists. In order to meet the shortfall, Messrs Alder and Fenwick had put E.G. Records and E.G. Music on the market for sale, which means effectively that the company was selling the copyrights. This is a fairly complex issue. In terms of E.G. Records, they were selling the copyrights, the phonographic copyrights of the records, that was sold to Virgin. In terms of the publishing, it was sold to BMG. They didn't sell the copyrights of the songs, they sold the rights to the income stream from the songs. Now, the aim was to sell these. The sale came to about £4.5 million for the two combined before the 1st of January 1991, so royalties would be paid and it would be straightforward. The shortfall would not be discovered or made obvious. However, the deals were very complex and they didn't take place until April, by which time my royalties were in some cases up to 4 years and 2 months late, and totalled £138,000. Now, to sell the copyrights of E.G. Records, it assumes that they owned them. Well, they didn't, in terms of King Crimson, because the original arrangement was a copyright sharing relationship between the group and E.G. management to a 70-30 degree. If you then move to the publishing, they produced publishing assignments which had been made, in some cases, in February 1975. Now, I received a visit on retreat in Sherborne House from Mr. Alder and David Enthoven, and they presented me with song assignments which had to be signed so that they could collect my royalties, protect my interests, and defend the copyrights around the world from possible bootlegging or theft. So, although I was signing over the copyrights, I wasn't really signing over the copyrights. I had to do this so that EG could collect my royalties, protect my interests, and defend the copyrights. So this constituted a collateral oral warranty which overrode, tell me when you've had enough of this, which overrode the seeming authority of the copyright assignment. So whereas my wife signed the settlement, left, paid for the privilege, had the gagging order, and went on to rebuild her career, I decided to stand and fight. And in the out-of-court settlement... Do you need me? That's fine, you steam ahead. Good, we're fine. So in the out-of-court settlement, which was agreed and signed in January 97, in the first week of January 97, there was a wonderful irony that I signed the out-of-court agreement between Virgin Records, BMG Publishing and EG. It gave me a little more time. So, since I had a little more time now available, the dispute was ending. I went down to the cellar where I had piles of boxes, paperwork, furniture, the lot, which had been there since we moved to the house 9 years before. And I thought, well, I'll begin to file some of this paperwork. And almost the first piece of paper I pulled out of a large box was the original agreement with EG signed in January, February 1970, which proved my case. It showed the copyright assignments. And because I'd been so busy fighting and on the road with Sylvie and Fripp and King Crimson and all the rest of it, I'd never been able to find the one document I needed to prove my law case. So here, in the week when I've signed the settlement, I have the document which would prove it if we go to the High Court. Now, you might say, well, how much does it cost to go to court in England and fight this? And the answer is £100,000 a week, and the case would usually take 6 weeks. So it will cost me £600,000 to fight this case if I have complete faith in justice available at law.
Do you have?
In the music industry, no. I have enough experience of seeing cases where the judge is not familiar with the process of the music industry, and where the judge is, they tend to hold for the common operating policy of the business, even where it's inequitable. In other words, but this is the way that business is done, but the artist gets screwed. Well, how would you expect the manager to make money then? Was the actual outcome of the Bill Nelson court case. So, anyway, yes. That was finally settled in September 1997, which was almost a 7-year period of 91 to 98. So looking at the 7-year blocks, you have 81 to 91, which is guitarcraft, professionally, hardly that, but it's my musical activity. 91 to 98 is the EG dispute, with my returning from guitarcraft to a life as a working musician, professional musician in the front line, Sylvie and Fripp and King Crimson, and the creation of Discipline Global Mobile,
98.
91 to 98.
Oh,
Discipline, the first time the name Discipline went on a record was in 1992 with The Great Deceiver, which was Sue Virgin. 93 we released 3 records, the Robert Fripp String Quintet, Trey Gunn and the California Guitar Trio, and by 1994 Discipline as a record company was more substantial. So that's the 7-year period, 91 to 98. Fripp's back as a professional musician, King Crimson is back as a working concern, this time a double trio. Discipline Global Mobile is an artist-friendly record company. What you don't have a lot of in this period, you have some but not as much, is guitarcraft. Courses continue. Last year we had a course in Seattle, in Chile and in Germany. This year, because I've been moving house and the business, we haven't had a guitarcraft course that I've been able to attend, although there are guitar circle courses which are available in Seattle, in Argentina and Germany. So that's brought us roughly up to date.
But you, one of the reasons you told this legal matters is that it made it for you impossible to start the new King Crimson sooner than...
Yes. That was one of the delaying reasons.
Yes. One day you pass the village church in Salisbury, and then you...
In Broadchalk, actually.
Oh, sorry.
Outside, in the village you came to visit us, yes.
And that was an inspiration for you to make the new King Crimson a double trio.
Well, you used the word inspiration. In guitarcraft we call it a point of seeing. And it was how to link with the King Crimson tradition and access all that was available from the work we'd done before, while linking with the creative future which was available to us. In 1981, for example, we couldn't really access the music which was available because of the level of hostility, notably in the music press in England, against it. So it was a question very much beginning again. In 94, what I was looking at doing is moving forwards while being able to draw on anything which is of value from my work before. But how to exactly do this, I didn't know, couldn't think through it, couldn't see it. So I was driving by the village church, the school on the right, the church on the left. In a flash, I saw it. There's the double trio. You have two drummers, Bill, who has a link with all that Crimson was, as well as the future. And you have Tony and Adrian, and all that they have access to from before as well as coming. And the other trio, you have Trey and Pat, where there are no rules written, and you can contrast the two between. I was very much hoping, very much wanting to play music from 81 era Crimson, frame by frame, for example. I really, really wanted to play that again, because it's such a powerful pile of music which I haven't heard superseded, and it didn't strike me as being dated at all. It struck me as still remaining very, very fresh. So that was it, double trio. This enables us to move forwards as well as connecting with what went before at the same time. So the next step after that point of seeing was actually to call Bill and say, Bill, are you happy at EG management? And he said yes. So I dropped the idea.
Mm-hmm. Without proposing him to start King Crimson again in
at that time, yes. Mm-hmm. At that time, Bill was happy at EG. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The next phone call I made to Bill was in January 1994, where I made the proposal to him, and this time Bill was, I think, prepared to leave EG. He'd been out with his jazz, with Earthworks, and I think had become probably well aware of the fact that EG had no interest whatsoever in his jazz life, but were more interested in Bill as a member of Yes, and possibly as a member of King Crimson, but not Bill as a jazz player. I think the penny had dropped with Bill at that time, although you'd obviously have to speak to him personally.
Still, I always ask myself, how did the other three members react to your proposal to add Trey and Pat to the group?
Well, I guess they said yes, without actually a sense of where it would lead. None of us did. But as a working idea, everyone was prepared to take it and see where it would go. The King Crimson live in Mexico City, a fair bit of which you can hear on Circus, and all of which, at least one complete show assembled, you can hear on a net download through Media 4.0 technology. And listening to Crimson in Mexico City, to me, validated the idea of the double trio. It worked musically, but it took a couple of years to get there.
So you weren't there already on the releases of what is it called? The official bootleg recording of
Boom.
Boom, yes.
Yeah.
It's not there already.
Well, it's there. It's there as a working idea, but with 2 years of working, the idea was sufficiently validated to say, there, listen to that. That's what we were getting at.
Mm-hmm.
You'll also get some sense of it from the double drums on Broadway, the Collectors Club release, where you can hear Pat and Bill working off each other. But Mexico City is a good validation of the double trio.
Now, at this moment, the double trio doesn't exist anymore. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's too unwieldy and impracticable. It's hugely expensive. It's logistically a nightmare. And I tried very hard to get the double trio functioning. And finally, earlier this year, I had to accept that it wasn't going to happen.
Mostly because Bill and Tony had other obligations.
At that time, Tony was just about to go out with Seal for what looked like being a year or two world tour. And we were also aware that Peter Gabriel is not that far away from touring, which is always for Tony a joy. A joy. Well, I'm speaking for Tony, but I know he loves it. With Bill, Bill's heart is really in his jazz playing at the moment, and I made 3 or 4 different suggestions to Bill about how musically we could move forward as the double trio, none of which Bill was able to accept unreservedly or completely. And my personal sense is that Bill has been moving for 30 years towards where he is now. As a drummer, Bill has been moving towards the point he is now at in Bill Bruford's Earthworks. And that's where his heart is. And his heart is not actually in King Crimson at the moment. I'm not speaking for Bill, but it seems from my perspective that the necessity for Bill is in Earthworks. And Crimson is an optional thing.
I know that you knew Trey Gunn from guitarcraft courses, but where did you know Pat Mastelotto from?
Sylvian Fripp.
Oh.
Sure.
Well, King Crimson 5 doesn't exist anymore. Maybe King Crimson 6 is now getting ready, but never...
Double duo.
The double duo. Why do you call it like that?
Well, there was a double trio, now there's a double duo.
Oh, okay. But nevertheless, King Crimson is more live than ever, one could say, because the last years we saw, well, I didn't see, but you started so-called projects.
Yes.
When did you start it?
November 1997, I believe. Mm-hmm. And that was Project 2, rehearsing together and recording the rehearsals in Nashville. That became Space Groove. The first live project was the December the 1st to the 4th, 1997, at the Jazz Cafe in London, which was Tony Levin, Bill Bruford, Trey Gunn and myself.
That's project one.
That's project one. We had no rehearsals for that. We actually met the afternoon before, the Sunday afternoon, to see if our equipment worked, and it didn't. So we went away again. And then we met at the venue and played for 4 nights.
But when did the idea for the projects originated?
Probably in the middle of 1997. Probably in the middle of 1997, or the third quarter of 97. It was a question of how to get things moving. Nothing would move. We rehearsed in Nashville earlier in 97 and very inconclusive week's rehearsals. Spent $30,000 on a week's rehearsals. Nothing conclusive came out of it.
You mean King Crimson?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, one of the business initiatives of the Double Trio was the establishment of what we call the pension fund. Now, what generally happens with a group, a working group doesn't have enough money to fund their own activities. For example, with the Double Trio, it cost $30,000 when we first began to put all the men and their equipment in one room. Because we were rehearsing in Nashville, where Adrian lives, we brought it down to $30,000 for a week's work. So most groups would have to go to their record company and draw down the money as an advance in order to rehearse. So if you do that, your rehearsals have to result in an album. And you're always in hock to the record company, and you always have to ask permission to do something which seems to you it's right for you to do. So one of the first things King Crimson established as part of the Double Trio, and it's, if you like, the Double Trio's business plan, was the provision of the pension fund. So royalties from, example, Baboom were put into a holding fund so that we had the capacity for independent initiatives, like meeting for rehearsals. So, but the outcome was inconclusive, and how to move to the next step. And Bill called me up once and said, look, he said, I'm making more albums than I have gigs. I have, I think, 5 or 6 albums he was involved in, and less gigs than that. So I said, all right then, we'll do a duo. The two of us will go out together, and we'll go to Ronnie Scott's for a week, or find a jazz club for a week, and we'll just improvise together. And he said, well, shall we invite Tony? I said, sure, fine. And then overnight I thought, well, if Bill can pull in Tony, then maybe I can pull in Trey. So I phoned Bill up and said, shall I ask Trey? Yeah, sure. So then that was project one, the first conceived project, as a response to Bill saying, I want some live work. What's Crimson doing? And we couldn't get Crimson going, so Bill and I will work, and then we'll pull in these other 2 members. So conceptually project 1 was the first, but in actuality project 2 was the first to work together just 3 or 4 weeks before that.
And then you worked together with the idea that it was a project.
At this point the thinking was beginning to formalize that, all right, this is a very good way of moving forwards. Whoever's available and would like to go out, even feels the necessity for working, let's pull the guys together and go out and do it. And the next conceived project, project 3, of Trey, Pat and myself, was actually behind project 4. Because what happened, Tony was available and interested in doing it, so we said sure. So what would have been project 3 dates became project 4 dates.
Project 4 is?
Project 4 is Pat Mastelotto, Trey Gunn and Robert with Tony Levin. So project 2 is ahead of project 1 and project 4 is ahead of project 3. So then Project 3 of Pat, Trey and Robert took place around the music seminar, new music seminar in Austin, Texas, where Pat lived. I was on one of the panels to do with bootlegging and taping, and Trey flew in, and we rehearsed. I mean, we met in Pat's garage, and then went out and played a tour of Austin. I think we played 4 nights, 5 nights, 4 nights.
And recorded all.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of all the projects, Project 3 is the closest to up and coming King Crimson.
Why?
Because it is. That's all I can say. It is. You can say from one point of view, well, the rhythm section is the new King Crimson rhythm section. You can also say that the drummer defines a group greater than any other member of the band. And certainly listening to the Project Box set, Bill defines Project 1, Adrian defines Project 2, Pat defines Project 3. Not to the same extent Project 4, funnily enough, which is more in transition, Pat in transition from one of 2 King Crimson drummers to being the King Crimson drummer. Project 3 is stunning stuff.
Is that your favorite?
At the moment, probably yes, because it's closest to my current concerns and thinking, and also provides greater musical templates for upcoming King Crimson repertoire. Mm-hmm. But they all have their moments. David Singleton and I are currently working on a 1-volume project, so perhaps very heavy King Crimson enthusiasts will want all 4 projects, but most people won't want everything. They would like an overview, perhaps. I mean, I'm certainly happy to have an overview of the projects. So this we're putting together at the moment, which will also be released in October, about the same time as the box set, the 4-volume box set, and will be called The Deception of the Thrush.
Do the projects still exist at this moment? I mean, well, the recordings will be released, but do you still play at this moment?
At this moment, the parts of the project players which is congealing is King Crimson, the double duo.
The double duo, yes.
Yeah. If anyone else phoned me up, fine. I'd be happy to talk about it. But I'm not myself going to make an initiative outside of King Crimson, because that's more than I can currently handle anyway. So that's going to be my focus. The door isn't closed to either Bill or Tony. Bill is out with Earthworks and unavailable, and Tony was off with Seal, so my thinking, I focused particularly on the double duo as we've discussed it. And then Tony Levin was emailed me, faxed me a couple of months ago and said his Seal tour had fallen through and he was available for Crimson work, but suggested that perhaps the thinking for Crimson as a double duo, I'd like to continue with that. Well, that's a hard one. I had to think about that for a month before making any reply. And my choice was, and this is not to close the door on Tony's involvement with Crimson in the future, my own thinking in terms of Crimson musically as a 4-piece, in terms of all the logistics and planning and budgeting for the 4-piece, my call was to stay with it as projected. To bring Tony in at this point would involve a number of logistical and practical concerns which we've just moved away from. we just managed to cure. That in itself isn't enough, because Tony Levin as a musical contribution is so stunning. But my call was to stay with the plans as we had it, which has already attracted a measure of angst and hostility on the disciplined guest book on the website. How could Fripp keep Tony out of King Crimson? Well, I'm not keeping Tony out of King Crimson, and if I felt Tony and I wouldn't work together in any context, I'd be heartbroken. But nevertheless, this one is on course, and I feel needs to be taken further. Then up comes the other comment. Well, Fripp is obviously the band leader. Look at all the things he's doing. He's planning, he's calling, he's telling, keeping Tony Levin out of King Crimson. Fripp's the band leader. Well, I don't feel like that. I've worked with band leaders. I know band leaders over many years. I've been working in groups for 38 years, working with band leaders for almost that period of time, and I do not feel like a band leader. Now, if I felt like a band leader, I'd say, hey, I'm a band leader. I don't feel like that. Because of the logistical problems and concerns of the double trio and how we could never go out and work, in the past year or two, I've had to make initiatives that needn't have fallen to me, but no one else was making the call, and finally make choices and decisions which, unless I had taken, King Crimson would not have had a suitable and adequate vehicle for manifestation. Other people, particularly on the outside, may well disagree with that, and this is not the only way King Crimson can move forward. There are other models, several of which I had suggested already, but at the moment this is one of the possible ways King Crimson can work, not exclusively to the others, but immediately my sense is this is the next step. And in the world where you phone people up, book plane tickets, studios, hire engineers, this is the one which is on course for the next period. If you said, how long will that be? I don't know. I suggested to the other members that we take this seriously as our prime commitment for the next 2 or 3 years. Even that doesn't rule out the possibility of Tony and or Bill.
So it's still possible that they join in?
Yeah, the kind of fun thing I have in mind is if you have your essential quartet, which is your working model, then maybe it would be possible for, say, a week in Park West in Chicago, for Bill and Tony to join for a special week of the double trio, around perhaps a quartet tour. Or perhaps for that week or 4 days or whatever, maybe Tony would join just for that period. You see, where you have two drummers, it gets incredibly complex. Where you have Tony Levin, it doesn't. Tony will join in with anyone at any time with exactly the right thing to play, because that's what Tony does. And Bill, as a player, is not predisposed towards doing nothing. If you put Bill in a situation with a drum kit, he will hit stuff. That's what he does. And he'll hit stuff a lot and often, because that is Bill's nature. With Tony is happy to stand there and play nothing for extended periods of time if he feels there's nothing he can contribute. And on the Project 4 tour, one of the highlights of the Project 4 tour in Seattle and Portland was Tony stood there with his hands in his pocket because he had nothing to play. So that was in Seattle. A hilarious moment. Tony standing there on stage with his hands in his pocket. So the next night, I said to him, if you're going to put your hands in your pocket, I'm going to file my nails. And I took out my nail file and put it on the top of my equipment. And at one point, Tony was standing there, just about, and I wove picked up the nail file and began to file my nails. So there.
Yeah.
Now look, we're coming to the end of our interview.
Yes.
All right, last questions.
Last questions, okay. How shall I ask you?
Well, shall I tell you when the next King Crimson live performance will be?
Well, I think you did already. Is that in May, Buenos Aires?
No. It's in November in Nashville at 12th and Porter.
Oh.
There are 4 nights at a small club in Nashville in the 3rd week of November.
Uh-huh.
And they will be made available through DJM Live, our new net download system.
Right.
Yeah. They'll essentially be almost rehearsals in public.
Really?
Yeah, almost. Not quite that. It'll be a bit more than that. But it'll be very much King Crimson thinking out loud in public view and falling down flat on their face with no room for camouflage or hiding.
Is that something that you took from the projects? Because a common...
No, it's something which actually we have always done, but this is just making it a bit more so. Mm-hmm. It's a pointed stick. Now, if you have 4 characters there, even experienced professional musicians, and they know they're there to make an album, there is nothing like exposure to public ridicule to galvanize the attention. And if these 4 experienced professional musicians know that in 3 weeks' time they will be standing up in front of people who can boo as well as cheer, then if you were to ask me, do I believe that will focus the attention, my answer is yes. So that's our challenge, our pointed stick.
You make a distinction between extemporisation and improvisation.
Yeah, improvisation is when it works. Extemporisation is when it doesn't. It's the difference between verse and poetry. Poetry is when the poet is the voice piece, if you like, for the poetry to flow. Verse is where you're listening to the poet work. So extemporisation is where professional musicians, you can hear them work at playing music. Improvisation is where you hear the music flow through musicians.
So would you say that an evening with Project 1 or Project 2, 3 or 4 is an evening with extemporisation?
Well, it has to be, yes. That's part of the process. If the muse doesn't always descend.
You say to let the muse descend. You once also said that the process of getting the muse to descend is it's terrifying.
Yes, well, to answer that properly, I don't like using the word real in any real way, but if you wanted a sense of what was actually involved in that, you'd have to come to a Guitarcraft course. In terms of asking me the question, there's other approaches from other places, but Guitarcraft is created to make that process a substantial, real and living one.
On which one can work.
Oh, certainly, yeah. So, how do you call on the muse? How do you get out the way of music? Well, how do you do it? What is your practice? What are the exercises? What is your intent? How is that intent supported and directed? Well, it involves attention. Well, how do you train the attention? For example, in Western psychology, William James attempted to still his mind for 3 minutes and failed and decided that it wasn't possible. So you have one approach to Western psychology. You have another approach, like Tibetan Buddhist meditation. It's only based on 2,500 years of exercises and practice aimed at, if you like, stilling the mind. That doesn't express it, I know. But are you going to trust William James, who tried it for 3 minutes and failed? Or are you going to trust a tradition which extends with practice, exercises and guidance over 2,500 years? Well, I know where I'm going to put my money.
Nevertheless, is it impossible for you to say in this situation why it is so that the process of getting the music to descend is so terrifying?
Where you have faith, nothing is impossible. Where grace is present, everything is possible.
Okay, Robert, thank you very much.